what we are seeing, our topic today is corporate governance. Means what? If a company is not managed well, what will happen? So the finance companies, banks, they are subject to a guideline known as corporate governance. That's what we are going to discuss today. However, I like to share this video. Can you see the video when I
Yes, sir.
share it? Okay, right. So this is about the once seventh biggest company in US. Means it's a very big company known as Enron, and it collapsed. So the video is the biggest fraud in history. So let's view it first. Then I'll start to discuss about corporate governance.
Now, but Enron was once the seventh largest corporation in America. They revolutionized trading and the energy market. They were far smarter than their competitors, and their business was intricate and too complex for the average person to understand. Except, in reality, it was all a big scam filled with lies, fraud, political manipulation. Enron was the biggest scam in US history. The fallout from the scam was monumental. Billions of dollars stolen, thousands of lost jobs, dozens of convictions, one suicide, and the unveiling of a very public display of corporate greed that shined directly into the heart of corporate America. This is the story of how one company took 10 years to grow to $60 billion in value, and then, in less than a month, go bankrupt. This is the story of Enron.
You are watching Tone Fusion TV.
Enron began as an energy supply company mainly dealing with natural gas. Eventually, the company moved on to trading, making energy deals in power, and then later moving on to broadband and even trading the weather. They were Wall Street's darling, the company that could never lose, and its stock price kept growing year on year. The company was also well connected politically. For example, Enron was the single biggest contributor to the George W. Bush campaign. Bush even called Kenneth Lay, the founder of Enron, Kenny Boy, and it's with Kenny Boy that the story starts. Growing up in a poor family, Kenneth Lay's father was a Baptist priest. The young Ken would often ponder about his future, a future where he could escape his current conditions. When he grew up, he became a prominent figure in the deregulation of the energy sector. The PhD graduate spent his time as a financial analyst in the Pentagon before climbing the ranks and becoming close friends with George Bush Sr. Ken Lay would even send the Enron corporate jet to take George Sr. and his wife to their son's inauguration. As you'll see later, these favors did not go unreturned. The first red flag for founder of the company, Kenneth Lay, that something was wrong within the company came during the Valhalla scandal of 1987. Two oil traders working for Enron gambled enormously on the company's behalf, shifting money to fake accounts with names such as MYARS or MyArse. Worried auditors told Lay that they found the two traders moving money into their own accounts, manipulating earnings, and gambling on trades beyond their capacity. But instead of firing the two rogue traders, Lay made no changes. Didn't seem to matter what they were doing, as long as they were making the company money. Enron even sent them a letter saying, "Please keep making us millions." Later, the two were convicted of fraud. Ken Lay acted shocked, saying that he was not aware of their reckless gambling and theft. But as revealed later, he actually encouraged it. One of the convicted traders was sent to jail for a year, and this gave Ken Lay a big problem. One of his main moneymakers was behind bars, and he needed someone new to bring in cash. Enter Jeffrey Skilling. Skilling, Enron's new CEO, was Lay's biggest asset. When he arrived at Enron, he started moving the company in a new direction. Skilling wanted to turn Enron from a gas supply company into a stock market for natural gas. He also introduced the company to mark-to-market accounting, an idea that would allow the company to fraudulently reap billions. So mark-to-market accounting simply allows the company to write down profits in their books on the day that the deal was signed. This meant that if Enron signed a deal worth $50 million over the next 10 years, They could write $50 million in their books that day, despite not receiving a penny. It didn't even matter if the deal fell through. Effectively, this meant that the company was worth more on paper than it had actually earned. The deals were often subjective. They could be worth whatever Enron thought they were worth. When the Security and Exchange Commission approved the accounting trick of mark-to-market for Enron, the office celebrated. They knew that this was the key to making billions. Meanwhile, Skilling was known for his Darwinian philosophy, survival of the fittest. His favorite book, The Selfish Gene, describes how greed and competition motivate human nature. At Enron, Skilling wanted to unlock these instincts in his employees. One way he did this was grading all employees on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the best and 5 being the worst. The thing was, 10% of all employees had to be graded a 5, and when you were graded a 5, you were fired. This created the competition that Skilling was looking for. People began to work 18 hours a day and were ruthless in their efforts to earn the company as much money as possible. Skilling famously said that money was the only thing that motivated people. Unsurprisingly, Skilling was a massive risk taker. He often went on wild adventures with other Enron executives. This includes dirt biking on dangerous trails, where people often flip their cars. An executive even required stitches after a biking accident on one of these trips. Skilling said he liked guys like this, guys with a bit of edge. Lau Pai, a mild-mannered executive, was one of these guys with a bit of edge. Skilling called Lau Pai his ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. He was CEO of an Enron subsidiary and seemed to be motivated by 2 things: money and strippers. Pai is an as mysterious figure as one can be in such a huge scandal. He left Enron in 2001 with $250 million and became the second largest landowner in Colorado. He left his business division with $1 billion of losses and escaped the whole scandal pretty much intact. Pai would come back later into this story, a few decades after the dust settles.
Enron Online will change the markets for many, many commodities. It is creating an open, transparent marketplace that replaces the dark, blind system that existed. It is real simple. You turn on your computer, and it's right there. And if you want to do business, you push the button. So that's our vision. We're trying to change the world.
And it wasn't just internet companies feeling the fever. Enron's stock had tripled in the space of 2 years. Everyone with a little bit of spare cash was playing the stock market game. Enron knew that as long as the company met or exceeded analysts' expectations, the stock price would keep rising. And somehow, they always met or exceeded those expectations. During this time, while Jeff Skilling stood at the company's conventions, telling his staff to put more of their 401k into Enron, he knew that the profits were actually going in the opposite direction. Around the world, they were losing billions on natural gas projects. Enron had poured billions of dollars into a plant in India, only to realize that India couldn't afford to buy the electricity. The site lay in ruins, but that didn't stop the executives at Enron writing down future profits for the project into their books and handing themselves massive bonuses. The analysts, the very people who were supposed to stop the corruption, fell under the spell of Skilling. The complexity of the company and the charisma of Skilling made analysts simply take him at his word. In fact, the ones that didn't were fired. The company soon began trading bandwidth after some dot-com inspiration. They made a deal with Blockbuster to provide streaming services, but the technology just simply didn't work well enough yet. The deal fell through, but Enron still wrote $53 million in their books for it. Things began to get out of control, and Enron soon began trading weather. Yes, the weather, like sunshine and rain. They would soon sell futures on the weather, essentially gambling what the temperature would be. You would probably imagine that most people would be skeptical of this, but it was activities like this that led Enron to being listed on the Fortune 500's most innovative companies list. But one reporter at Fortune would soon start asking questions, and this would later lead to the company's demise. Bethany McLean, a reporter at Fortune, was doing a piece on Enron. She had a phone call with John Skilling where she asked some simple questions like, how exactly does Enron make its money? Skilling said he couldn't answer because he wasn't an accountant, so he sent a few finance guys, including Andy Fustow, the CFO, to answer her questions the next day. They sat in the office for 3 hours poring over documents. At the end, as others had left the room, Andy turned to the reporter and said, I don't care what you write about the company, just don't make us look bad. Andy Fustow was a character described as having no moral compass. He made Enron debts disappear by moving them to shell companies so that on paper, Enron was profitable. He even set up his own fraudulent firm just to buy Enron assets. This fraudulent firm was called LJM. Andy would later convince 96 bankers to invest in the scam LJM firm. LJM would make Andy Fustow $45 million, but it seemed that the banks were in on the deal too. Merrill Lynch bought 3 Nigerian barges from Enron and sold them back 5 months later. This was to help Enron cook their books, and later, several bankers would go to jail for this. Both Skilling and Lay knew that even this couldn't last forever. They needed a new gold mine. And then, they turned their eyes to the Golden State, California. Now, Skilling became increasingly volatile, arriving at work unshaved and red-eyed. On a 2001 investor's call, he even called an investor an a-hole. A brash reaction from a Fortune 500 CEO. The pressure was getting to him. The company had to keep making quarterly targets despite their businesses failing at home and abroad. California was going to be their next big score. Enron merged with Pacific Gas and Electric, which gave them access to the Californian grid. Once this was achieved, strange things began to happen. In the newly deregulated electricity market of California, rolling blackouts became common. But strangely, the state had almost double the capacity than there was demand. So why was this happening? It turns out Enron traders were manipulating the market. They moved electricity out of state to increase demand, and when the price got high enough, they would move it back in.
Okay. Right, so I was showing you a video clip on Enron. Enron was the 7th biggest company in US. So we all believe US is a place where you have a lot of well-disciplined politicians and businessmen. However, wherever man lives, man is greedy. And let me continue this video, and after that I'll start today's session.
They even called power plants and asked them to make excuses to shut down for a few hours, increasing the price as there was less demand. Traders had energy maps and the control to move the energy. They knew exactly how to squeeze every last dollar from the people of California. While the state faced blackouts causing unknown tolls on the lives of Californians, the Enron traders were high-fiving themselves over their bonuses. Ken Lay even said, "It doesn't matter how many rules you Californians make, I got a bunch of smart people here that will figure out how to make money anyway." The year-long ordeal would cost California $30 billion. But why didn't the state put a stop to it? Well, the law states that it's the federal government issue, and it's their responsibility to take care of it. And guess who the president was at the time? That's right, Lay's good friend, George W. Bush. Bush refused to step in, saying that it was his administration's belief that intervention would not solve anything. The Federal Energy Regulation Commission also didn't step in until the Senate forced them to. The chairman of the commission was personally recommended by Kenneth Lay. This whole ordeal caused the people of California to turn on their governor and appoint a new one that was more suitable for the role, the Terminator. One day in 2001, out of the blue, Skilling suddenly resigned. Perhaps he figured he could leave the company years before it imploded. Then he could say, well, it was fine when I left it. Regardless, Kenneth Lay took over the CEO role. Just one day later, Sharon Watkins, who worked under the company CFO Andrew Fostow, sent a letter to Kenneth Lay detailing the staggering amount of corruption and fraud that she'd found within the company. The Wall Street Journal would write a piece about some of Andy's dealings, and soon, the SEC would launch an informal inquiry. At this point, investors began to feel nervous. Kenneth Lay tried to bring calm and reassurance to investors and employees. While he was addressing the company's issue to a speech to employees, just several blocks away, Enron's accounting firm was busy shredding documents. One of the accounting firms shredded 1 ton of paper on October the 23rd, but it was too late. The walls began to fall, and over the course of a month, the company went from that healthy appearance of one of the leading innovators to total bankruptcy.
You want us to believe that you sat there in your office and had no clue that this place was about to collapse? On the day I left, on August 14th, 2001, I believe the company was in strong financial condition. I did not do anything wrong that was not in the interest. And all the time that I worked for Enron Corporation, that was in the interest of the shareholders of the company. If I could go back and redo things, I would not. Now.
For the thousands of people who held Enron stock, the market was frozen at the $32 mark, and when it reopened, it was $9 a share. Meanwhile, Enron executives had a fire sale of all of their stock. In the months leading up to the bankruptcy, Skilling told his employees to buy more stock while he sold all of his. As the media began circling the story, criminal investigations were launched. Cliff Baxter, a trader who often went on Skilling's wild adventures, cashed in $30 million from Enron. After being called to testify in court, Baxter got in his Mercedes, drove down a quiet street, and shot himself. Andy Fostow, the former CFO, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud. He ratted out and cut himself a deal to testify against other Enron executives. He was sentenced to 10 years but only served 6 and paid $23 million in fines. Enron's accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, the one that shredded 1 ton of paper, was convicted of obstructing justice. America's oldest accounting firm collapsed due to the loss of reputation. 29,000 people lost their jobs. Ken Lay earned $300 million from Enron. He was found guilty of 10 counts of securities fraud and was facing 45 years in prison, but died of a heart attack a month before his sentencing. 20,000 people at Enron lost their jobs and medical insurance, with an average severance pay of only $4,500. Executives were paid $55 million during the bankruptcy and cashed a further $774 million in the year before the collapse. Skilling, the mastermind behind Enron, was convicted of 19 counts of security and wire fraud. He was sentenced to 24 years and $180 million in fines. While in jail, his parents and his son passed away. He only served 12 years of his 24-year sentence and was released in early 2019. But this isn't where the story ends. Skilling is hoping that he can get a second chance. He appears to be plotting a return to the energy sector. Only 2 months after his prison release in early 2019, Skilling was entered as a manager of a new company which he founded a few years ago. Lau Pai, the former Enron executive who sailed off into the sunset with his $250 million, is reported to be helping Skilling regain connections and funding. According to the Wall Street Journal, Skilling has been holding meetings with former Enron executives in relation to starting a new venture. This may be difficult for him as obviously his reputation has been massively smeared. But apart from people's perception, there's technically nothing stopping him. The SEC has banned Skilling from being an officer of any public company, so as long as his venture stays private, he can do whatever he wants. So that is the story of Enron, with a not-so-typical ending. Despite being one of the biggest players in the biggest scam in US history, resulting in billions of dollars in losses for average people, tens of thousands of lost jobs, and executives reaping in billions, Skilling is out of jail and free to start again. Enron's motto was Ask Why. During its astronomical rise, it seemed that no one bothered to ask why, how, or where the money was coming from. And now, with Skilling out of jail and trying to re-enter the business world, maybe once again, we should ask, why? So that wraps up our look at Enron. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see stuff like this or much more, you should definitely consider subscribing to this channel. If you want to see my last video on business fraud, which was the Theranos story, I'll leave a link for that after this.
Okay, so I shared you one of the eye-openers of corporate world, Enron, which was the 7th biggest company in US, in a country which we believe things happen in a well-disciplined and well-organized manner. A huge scandal, and 29,000 employees lost their jobs and health insurance. Millions and billions burned down of the shareholders' money, and they were highly politically connected. George W. Bush, the senior, the junior, then they were so powerful enough to make the person they prefer, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the mayor of California. And finally, what happened? One top corporate employee, years ahead of seeing the explosion of this company, left and became the biggest landowner in California. Another chief accountant left well ahead of the collapsing of this company. Then suddenly the company collapsed and it went to the share market. Yesterday it was $30 per share. When the next day the share market opened, the price plummeted to $9 per share. And the rest is history. So what does it mean? If the companies are not managed well, if the companies are not governed well, the companies will definitely collapse. Remember, most of the collapsing of companies took place because of those who manage it, those who own it. And the corporate leaders become so powerful that they can themselves decide who will be the next president. What's happening? Okay, sorry for that. Okay. Now, this is where corporate governance matters. I think you got this document, the reading material. Today I don't have any slides, but a lengthy reading material. Okay. So banks and finance companies, they get directions, rules, determinations, and notices and guidelines by the regulator. So in my case, I have compiled it into a book, a lengthy book, right? So what I'm quoting is set of pages included in this book under one topic. The topic is corporate governance. Year 2015, sorry, there was a political change in Sri Lanka, and the theme was good corporate governance. That's a nice word. Companies and countries should be governed ethically. But at the same time, remember, there is a nice statement. Power corrupts you. Absolute power corrupts you absolutely. Okay. We believe in US democracy. Good. And in many books which I have read, I have come across a lot of instances where they talk about how political power and the corporates connected. Now, in this book, which I'm reading at the moment, there's a story about an individual business owner who has his business was solar power panels. His business was bankrupted. Somehow, he got $100,000 and donated it into Barack Obama's first election campaign. Barack Obama became president of US. Within 2 years, this business guy was given 486 million from government's pockets to restart his business. But nothing has happened to the business. But the message was clear. If you help me, I'm the politician, I will help you. That is happening everywhere you believe in democracy and in any other system. And this book says it gave results for Barack Obama. In his second election campaign, it was very easy for him to raise $1 billion US from the business community to run his election campaign. So if that happens in America, what about other countries? Then I would end discussing on US and politics. There was a guy known as Mark Rich. He involved in prohibited business of US. For an example, when there were economic embargoes and sanctions on Iran, when it is illegal to buy petrol from Iran, Mark Rich purchased them and sold them back to other countries. Later on, there was an article about this illegal business. So Mark Rich had to leave US before the legal actions take place. So he went to Switzerland and became a political refugee-like and stayed there. However, he was so rich, he has nothing to lose, but unfortunately, his daughter was living in US. She died out of cancer, and Mark Rich could not attend her funeral. In the last day of Bill Clinton, he gave presidential pardon to Mark Rich, so Mark Rich could come back to US. In return, Mark Rich gave 250 million or quarter billion donation to Clinton fund, Clinton welfare fund or something. That's how things happen. Okay? So this is the world we are living. If I quote about Sri Lanka, I may quote ample of examples. Prefer to talk about US and directly move into our subject heading today. Finance Companies Corporate Governance Direction number 3 of 2008. Once again, remember when we were talking about primary dealers, we talked why primary dealer companies collapse. Then I gave you one reason: mismanagement, fraud. Okay. Now these things you have to avoid. But unfortunately, if these things happen from the top, then what? That's why this direction is so important. This direction may be cited as Finance Companies Corporate Governance Direction number 3 of 2008 and shall apply to every finance company registered in terms of Section 2 of Finance Companies Act number 78 of 1988 and shall come into operation with effect from 1st January 2009. Okay. Right. Now think about the structure of a company. Okay. In a corporate world today, owners are not involving in day-to-day activities. Who are the owners of a company? Think about a listed company and tell me who are the owners. In the chat box, tell me who are the owners of a company. Shareholders, very good. Shareholders are the owners of the company. So we call them equity holders. Are they coming to the company on day-to-day basis and take decisions? No. The shareholders are not coming to the company and taking day-to-day decisions. they have given the power to the management to look after the business which they own. So there is shareholders meeting once in a year, AGM, annual general meeting. If something unusual need approval from shareholders, there is EGM, extraordinary general meeting, and you can take approval from the shareholders. Rest is up to the management of the company. Think about the company which we displayed in the video, Enron. That's a listed company in US. The shareholders are not involving in any kind of day-to-day activities. So there's a structure to help this, to sustain this system. The structure is, who is the top of a company? What is the designation? As far as you know, yes, chairman, very good. Chairman stays on the top of the company. And the chairperson, very good, the chairperson gets involved with the board of directors, BOD, board of directors. In this board of directors, there are two types of directors. One type we called executive directors. The other type we call them non-executive directors. Okay. Can someone tell me who is, okay, what is the difference between executive director and non-executive director? Executive and non-executive. Executive means you are involving in day-to-day activities of the company. Non-executive director means what? They are not involving in day-to-day activities of a company. In addition to that, we use another nice term, independent. Independent means I can think independently if I am not owning a considerable number of shares of this company. Then I become independent non-executive director. Okay. Now, we all see things in this world with our eyes. Okay, you have two eyes. With that, you see things. But to what extent you see will depend on the height you are seeing things. Suppose you are very small. Say you are an infant, just 2 feet height. What you see is not what a 6 foot grown-up man sees. Suppose this grown-up man is staying in 3-story building. What he sees is not what this 2 feet child is seeing on the ground. A person who is flying on a helicopter will see more vast area with his own eyes than the person who is staying on the top of the 3-story building. Means what? We all see the world with our own eyes, but what we see will depend on the height. Okay? At the same time, when I see things and when I'm attached to certain areas, my thinking will be different. Do I see the same thing? My interpretation will be different. Okay? Right. Non-executive independent directors, how they see things will be different from someone who is coming to work and involving in day-to-day activities. Right? I'll tell you a nice example. There was a time all non-religious leaders, the brilliant people of that time, commonly believed and accepted one thing. What is that? Earth is flat. If you can see things otherwise, you will be killed. There was either like that. So we who were living on planet Earth, walking here and there, very clearly understood one thing. Earth is flat. Okay. We knew Earth as back of our palms, and we know it's flat. There may be mountains and there may be certain pits and holes, but on an average, we all can agree Earth is flat. Okay, if you are living on a slope, we must be slipping, but most of the time we are not slipping on planet Earth, so it's very flat, very clear. While saying that, we have no attachment to moon. We are not living on moon. As long as we are not living on moon, and as long as we are far and far away from moon, we can see moon is round shaped, but Earth is flat. That is the difference between how we see things. Okay. When you are involving in day-to-day activities like living on planet Earth, what you see is different from a man from moon is looking at planet Earth. A man from moon will definitely say, look here, Earth is flat, but my moon is, Earth is round shaped, a ball, but my moon is flat. A person who is living on planet Earth can very clearly say, look here, I know my world like back of my palm, it's flat. And with my naked eyes, I can see your world, moon, is round shaped. That's how we look at things. Okay. Having independent, non-executive directors in a board would enable more collective, healthy arguments taking place in the board and very good decisions taking place. Suppose you are involving in gold pawning and you see the price is continuously going up. You are very happy. You don't see the charts, but someone far away who has no interest in gold would scratch his head and say, my dear, be careful. Suppose you are involving and investing in Colombo Stock Exchange, you would see and you would be proud to say, look here, we are breaking all the barriers and CSC has surpassed the highest ever amount in history. And we will soon reach 10,000 mark. Yes, but be careful. So those who are involving in day-to-day activities see things differently from someone who is not at all involved would see. Right? Someone who is investing in stock market, in Colombo stock market, would get a certain flow of information from maybe one or two sources, and they believe that's the reality. For an example, there is a nice argument. Hotel industry will bloom and boom very soon. The Chinese tourists who have vaccinated, the Chinese vaccines, and not Pfizer and any other Western manufactured vaccine will not be allowed to visit to their countries. So their only option is to come to countries like Sri Lanka, and Sri Lankan tourism will have superb inflow. Nice statement. And everyone in stock market is picking hotel shares where they don't have a healthy cash flow at the moment. But you believe in what someone else says, and the hotel share prices go up. Export dipped Haley's, yes, they are export oriented, and you believe it's going continuously up, and you're spending more and more, buying at the top and believing it will further grow up. So when you're within the crowd, you don't see anything different, like anyone living on planet Earth. Okay, right. So on the top you have chairman. Who is chairman? Is he executive or non-executive? The chairman, you said he is the top person. Yes, I agree. Is he an executive or non-executive? Others? Yes, chairman is non-executive. And the board consists of independent non-executive directors as well as in certain boards, executive directors. Then you have CEO. Okay. In our case, Enron, Kenneth Lay was the chairman, Skilling was the CEO. Right. Now, CEO, Chief Executive Officer, the term itself says executive, the top person of day-to-day management activities. Under him, you have normally the CEO stroke GM. And under him, you may have DGMs, deputies, and AGMs. Then the hierarchy moves down. That's how a corporate structure is set. Now, the first part talks about the responsibilities of board of directors. Right. There's another problem. There are many SOEs, state-owned enterprises in Sri Lanka. And whenever a political baton change, the newly appointed political party to govern the country will appoint their closely associated fundraised persons into these positions. What is that? Board of directors. Right. What can be their prime objective? Whatever their prime objective, they don't even understand the purpose of this company. Okay, so this is one bad example or practice taking place in countries like ours. So the board of directors, whoever appointed to a finance company, is having this responsibility. Means what? The regulator has clearly set the rules, the responsibilities for directors. If you are the director, these are your responsibilities. The board of directors, hereafter referred to as board, shall strengthen the safety and soundness of the finance company by, number one, approving and overseeing the finance company's strategic objectives and corporate values, ensuring that such objectives and values are communicated throughout the finance company. Approving, okay, the first part is on strategy, including overall risk policy and risk management procedure mechanisms with measurable goals for at least next 3 years. Means what? You have to ensure there is a company, ongoing company, which is sustainable, which is managed in a sustainable manner. Identifying risks. Now, the first part, here you looked at the term risk. Once again, risk. So risk identification is first part. Okay. Implementing of appropriate systems to manage risks prudently. So the board of directors, they will look at risk factor, because most of the time day-to-day executives, they will not worry about these risks. Approving of policy of communication, reviewing the adequacy and the integrity of the finance company's internal control system. Okay. So remember the first two things, risk management and internal audit. You look at the internal control systems. Okay. I tabled this documentary, Enron. The chairman was given a report at the last minute talking about frauds that have taken place within the company. Means what? These are the areas the board should consider, highlight. But it took place in the last minute, and that was too late. Anyway, chairman himself was encouraging all these frauds in that movie which he shot. Identifying and designating key management personnel who are in position significantly influence policy, direct activities, exercise control over business activities, operation and risk management. Defining the areas, okay. So these are responsibilities of the board. Ensuring that there's appropriate oversight, okay. periodical assessing of effectiveness of governance practices, including selection, okay, ensuring the finance company has an appropriate succession plan. Okay, so that's another term you must remember, succession plan. What do you mean by succession plan? Now these are written down. Succession plan. So every finance company, one responsibility of board of directors is to ensure continuing the company irrespective of the leadership changes. Okay, right. Means what? There must be a mechanism to groom up the people of this company to fill any possible vacancies that take place. Okay. Now I'll ask you one simple question. The biggest and the oldest political party in Sri Lanka, UNP. If the existing leader retire or goes out of business or whatever, who will replace him? Is there a nominated person? No. This is why this party collapsed to the lowest level. Next, competitor. They had a leader, and they always want to find his successor from who is bearing the same surname. That's another big failure. Okay. How do you know that he's the right person? Think about the third force. Have they nominated and generated and attracted young people to replace themselves? Say if the current leader moves out, who will replace him? No such succession plan. Okay. Now, this question was raised in a book, Lombard Street. Okay. So that was after a bank run took place in 1800. George Bagehot, he wrote a book, Lombard Street, Capital Market. That time, there was no such person called governor of central bank. So in London, Bank of England, or yeah, the biggest bank, had to act as the central bank. And by that time, George Bagehot in his book said, we must appoint a person and name him governor of central bank. The bank that acts as the lender of last resort should be named central bank. And the person who governed this should be known as governor. Then he says, under this governor, there must be a trainee who will become the next governor, and that person must be at least 10 or 15 years younger than the existing governor. Then he further says, the deputy governor, that is the term he has given to the second in line. The deputy governor should never ever address governor as sir. Why? Okay, so there is a leader and you name him governor. Under him, there is deputy governor who is maybe 1 decade younger than the governor. Right? Deputy governor should never address the governor as sir. That's how he has written this book. Why? The moment you address someone as sir, you yourself admit, I am many steps behind you. Okay. As long as you address someone as sir, there won't be healthy arguments between these two. Okay. Means what? Even in 1800, there were efforts to look into succession plan. If the existing governor of central bank leaves, there must be well-trained person to take over. And that person may be sharing different thinking pattern, but he was closely working with the existing governor. Okay? And I would say there is a very nice book in the library, IBSL library, Courage to Act, written by Ben Bernanke, the chairman of Federal Reserve's former chairman. Right? He was the chairman of Federal Reserve in 2008 when there was financial crisis. This book is his autobiography. So he says he was a university lecturer. One day, a team came up to him and said, "We have earmarked you as an advisor, economic advisor to US president. And that's a political appointment. And that's a full-time job." Means what? If you are willing to, you have to resign from your permanent job as university lecturer. Join us. It's a political appointment. Means what? When the existing president leaves, your job is no more. Are you ready to join? He took 1 week and joined this team. Now he is economic advisor to US President George W. Bush. And after a couple of years, once again, another team approached Ben Bernanke, the economic advisor to the president, and said, "Okay, we have earmarked you as a person suitable to replace Alan Greenspan, the current Federal Reserve chairman. Are you willing to?" He finally nodded, "Okay, fine. If so." Now, Alan Greenspan has been continuously being the chairman of Federal Reserve for 16 years. And the last 4 years he's on, you will be a trainee under him for 4 years. So Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke argued, developed different thoughts. But Ben Bernanke knew he is not the only person who is being earmarked. There were some other qualified people. And later on, Alan Greenspan has given first priority to this guy, Ben Bernanke. Now a team approached him and said, "Okay, now there will be a round of interviews which you have to face to be the governor of Federal Reserves, that country's US central bank." Okay, right, fine. Now the process started. After a few interviews, he said, "Okay, now prepare for the interview with George W. Bush, the president of US." So it was like almost half a day discussion. And George W. Bush, the president, had said, "Okay, fine, I accept him." Now he's got green light. Then he was said, "Okay, now we have to face the final interview." Now Ben Bernanke asked, "After US president, I thought the interview procedure is over." No, you have to get the approval not from the head of FBI, intelligence service. So in this intelligence service, as per this book, he was asked, "Have you ever had connection with any kind of terrorist groups, either in university or after that?" Then he said in his book, "I said no," within bracket. He says, "Okay, even if I had, would I ever say so?" And later on he writes further, means what? "I have been followed from that much past in my history." That's how they select next layer. Think about countries like Sri Lanka. The moment political party power change, next party comes in, overnight, they find someone suitable to be the top person of this institute. Sometimes you import from nowhere and place him. You are not looking at whether he understands what we need, any kind of discussion, nothing. But look at how things happen in US. I'm not saying US is the best. I have shown you Enron and other things. At the same time, remember, they have some well-laid good practices. This is one such. Ensuring succession plan. Appropriate succession plan for key management personnel. Means what? When someone leaves, maybe the CEO, this company will not collapse. CEOs may come and go. They are doing a job, but the company should survive. Meeting regularly with the key management personnel to review policies, establish lines, and communicate. Okay. Understanding the regulatory. Exercising due diligence in the hiring and oversight of external auditors. Now, these are the responsibilities of board of directors. auditors, in our case, Enron, Arthur Andersen, 100 years old, highly recognized auditing firm, collapsed after Enron collapsed. They lost their fame. They put tons of papers into shredding machines. Okay. The board shall appoint the chairman and the CEO and define and approve the functions and responsibilities of chairman and the CEO in line with paragraph 7 of this direction. Okay. Now, who is appointing the chairman and the CEO? Board of directors. There shall be a procedure determined by board to enable directors upon personal reasonable request to seek independent professional advice in appropriate circumstances at the finance company's expense. The board may be sometimes need professional advice. Okay, you are going to invest in maybe Burma, what we call today Myanmar. But before investing and starting up another subsidiary in Myanmar, you need a professional advice. Then that advisor would say, okay, don't go to that country. The democracy is not well established. There may be military coups. Better you not start. Okay, so you have to listen to some professional advisors. And to do that, there must be room for that. So board can take professional advice at the expense of the finance company. The board shall resolve to provide separate independent professional advice to directors to assist relevant directors to discharge their duties. The director shall abstain from voting on any board resolution in relation to matter in which he or any of his relatives or a concern which he has substantial interest is interested and shall not be counted in the quorum for the relevant agenda item in the board meeting. Right. Sometimes the board, there are approving limits. Suppose you are purchasing something about 100 million worth, maybe server plus softwares. Maybe you want to upgrade your entire computer system and the total cost is more than 100 million. And you are going to buy it from one supplier. Such level is above the CEO's level, as per the written down policies you may have in your company. So that 100 million jobs come for the board approval. And that supplier may be wife of a director. Now, if that director sits on the board to decide on this 100 million job, definitely we can say that's a biased decision. Therefore, the director, the husband of 100 million contract, will stay away from the discussion. So that is mentioned here. Number 4, a director shall abstain from voting. So he should not vote. He must declare and say, okay, I'm not going to vote and I'll walk out of the meeting. In this area, I have this particular interest. So that must be there. Okay. Remember, that's not how the political decisions are taken place. When you want to grant something, you want to grant it to your kith and kin. Right. So we were discussing about voting and quorum. Okay. Right. So I'm encouraging you to read annual reports of your own bank. Right. Or if you are not yet employed, still find an annual report, especially of a bank or a finance company, and go through the pages. There will be a set of pages dedicated for annual corporate governance report. The board shall adopt scheme of self-assessment to be undertaken by each director annually and maintain records of such assessments. Okay, so remember, it's not easy to become a director, and after becoming a director, there are a lot of responsibilities. If a company is going to collapse, like what happened at Enron, means what? It's not well managed. If the company is not well managed, whose responsibility is that? That is the responsibility of the board of directors. They are responsible to run the company in a sustainable manner. Risk, internal controls. These two things will be the cause of collapsing of a company. Frauds, theft, fire, natural disasters, all these things are covered under risk and internal control. If that is well managed, then the executives will run the company smoothly. So board of directors responsibilities are perfectly noted down. Meeting. There must be at least 12 times. Means what? At least once in a month you must meet. So the board of directors are not involving in day-to-day management. They are not looking into things happening in day-to-day, but they will meet at least once in a month and discuss and take decisions. Number 2, board shall ensure that arrangements are in place to enable all directors to include matters and proposals in the agenda. A notice at least 7 days shall be given. Okay. Now, you are not asked to report to the board tomorrow. At least 7 days prior you are given. A director who has not attended at least 2/3 of the meeting in the period of 12 months, immediately preceding or has not attended the 3 consecutive meetings, shall cease to be a director. Okay. So if you are not interested, we are not interested. The board shall appoint a company secretary whose primary responsibility shall be to handle the secretariat services. Okay, so I'm leaving you to read these. The company secretary shall maintain the minutes. Number 9, minutes of the board shall be recorded in sufficient detail so that it is possible to gather from the minutes as to whether the board acted with due care and prudence in performing its duties. The minutes of board meetings shall clearly contain or refer to the following: summary, matters, fact-finding discussions, explanations and confirmations. Okay. Now comes the composition of board. Who shall be the members of a board? Subject to the transition, okay, right. An employee of a finance company may be appointed, elected, or nominated as a director of the finance company. So he will be termed as executive director, means what? He is involving in day-to-day activities while being a director, provided that the number of executive directors shall not exceed 1/2 of the number of the directors of the board. Okay, so in a board, there can be executive directors, but that number should be at least half. Means what? At least half should be non-executives. The number of independent non-executive directors of the board shall be at least 1/4. We talked about independent, means what? They, okay, now there is the definition. Independent, if you want to be independent, has shares exceeding 2% of the paid up capital or 10% of paid up capital of another finance company. If you own more than 2% of the paid up capital, you are no more independent. Okay. Independent means what? It's like looking at planet Earth while living on moon. Okay. Then you are independent. The moment you have 2% or more shares in a company, it's like you are living on planet Earth. Then you are interested, emotionally attached. But someone living on moon has no attachment to planet Earth, so he can see the shape very clearly. If he has more than 10% of another finance company, okay, even though he is not having much interest with us, he is having interest with another competitor. That's again bad. So you are no more independent. Has been employed by the finance company during the 2-year period immediately preceding the appointment as a director. Okay. You have been working in the same company and immediately became a director, then you are not independent. But if you have an interval of 2 years, then your attachments have gone out. Then you are independent. So remember these clarifications. What do you mean by independent? Has a relative who is a director or CEO or key management personnel or hold shares exceeding 10%. Now you are not owning, but one of your relative is owning. Therefore, you are connected to them. Represent a shareholder, debtor, okay, or some other similar stake. Is an employee or director has shareholding of 10%. Means what? If you have any kind of connectivity with the bank or the finance company, you are no more independent. In the event an alternative director is appointed to represent an independent, the same criteria applies. Non-executive director shall have necessary skills and experience to bring an objective to bear on issue of strategy, performance, and resources. Okay, we'll try to read it again. Non-executive director shall have necessary skills and experience to bring an objective judgment to bear on issue of strategy. Okay. Now, in most of the countries, finance minister has a technical knowledge of economics. Most of them are postgraduate holders in the subject of economics. But in Sri Lanka, maybe you're having just a diploma on fashion designing, and you are the finance minister. Okay. Or you don't have any kind of what we say here. What is that? Necessary skills and experience to bring an objective judgment to bear on issues of strategy. Okay. So this is the expectation. Right, number 7. With effect from the 3 years from the date of this direction. So 2008 is the date year, right? So after 3 years means from 2011, a meeting of the board shall not be duly constituted, although the number of directors required to constitute the quorum at such is present, unless at least 1/2 of the number of directors that constitute the quorum at such meeting are non-executive directors. So after 2011, at least 1/2 should be non-executives. Number 8, the independent non-executive directors shall be expressly identified as such in all corporate communications that disclose the names. Okay, so their name, okay, should be disclosed. There shall be a formal, considered, and transparent procedure for appointment of new directors. Right. Then I'm leaving the rest to you to read. Criteria to assess the fitness and propriety of directors. Number 1, age limit. 70 years is the maximum to be the director of a finance company. Okay, just tell me yes or no. Do you agree with this age limit? The maximum age limit of an of a director is 70 years old. After reaching that, you can't be holding the director. Others? Yes, you agree. It's a good decision. If I ask why, why do you think a person more than 70 years not suitable to be a director? Why? Yeah, we human beings are very good at reasoning. People tend to struggle after the age of 70. Okay, then why do you appoint them as the legislation idea? Okay, now if you think they are not fit enough physically, right? So what I want to show you is a company. Now, this Colombo Stock Exchange yesterday, 16 billion traded, and it has surpassed forever highest. Now we are reaching like 9,000 units in the SPI, right? So I want to show you a company Let's see whether that's there. Once again, still it's very slow. Samsung International. That's your DSI. Okay. And under announcements, okay, you can see the chairman and yeah, appointment of directors. Right. Okay. Anyway, what I want you to show is this applies. This does not apply the age limit to many other listed companies. So in companies like this one, Samsung Industries, you'll find shareholders have the authority to appoint persons even above 70 years old. Okay? So if you are the shareholder, you will get a statement asking to re-elect a person who is more than 77 years old as a director, and you get approved and you become a director. So age is not a barrier in some other private companies. Okay, so one criteria is you must be less than 70 years old. The other, you cannot be a director of more than 20 companies. Means what? There was a time, let's say year 2008, that was the time this direction came into practice. Say Mr. Lalit Kotalawala, he was a director of more than maybe 100 odd companies, maybe 300 companies. If that is the case, you can't even dedicate 1 day per company. Means what? We believe you have an individual capacity. The ideal maximum that you can be responsible is 20 or below, right? So that is the criteria of fitness and propriety. Right. Now, as I said last week, we will look into past papers. Okay. Last week, we did some questions from unit trusts. Okay. So we will continue on corporate governance next week. And there are so many directions, rules, determinations, notices, and guidelines that we have to follow. So first we will complete corporate governance. That's a very nice and important area. I showed you a practical example, Enron, a well-established company, maybe the 7th best performing company in New York, in US. They collapsed. And they were so powerful. They were highly connected to the top political persons like George W. Bush. They were so powerful. Remember, my dear, we cannot think individually on our own. Our thinking is often influenced. So someone who is having money can make us to think on their behalf. And maybe unknowing, we will vote for someone who is highlighted by a force, who is having enough money. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger became the mayor, removing the troublemaker for Enron as the mayor. And people did it, thanks to the power of money. Okay, right. Now we will take another subject area today. Right. I said when we were doing superannuities that there were very few questions coming under superannuities. So let's take that. Write down September 2014, September 2014, September 2014, question number 3. Right. So these questions as few sentences to describe the area. You need not to write. We will directly write the question, then you can write the answer. I'll read out the first sentence. Provident and pension funds play a major economic and social role in the countries, especially during high risk of aging population. Now, Sri Lanka is a country where we are experiencing aging population. But think about Japan. Japan, they became so developed, and almost all the members of the population was interested in economic development, and they forgot to have children. And now they are suffering. If you go to Japan, you will find a lot of old people, and very rarely you will find a baby, small kid, right? So they are facing this problem. Okay, number one, write down. Describe how above funds serve the economy and the society of a country. Let me repeat. We are talking about pension funds, provident funds. Describe how above funds serve the economy and the society of a country. Number two, what are the major differences between EPF and ETF? What are the major differences between EPF and ETF? What are the major differences between EPF and ETF? Number three, why should these funds adopt a strategy of greater diversification of why should these funds adopt a strategy of greater diversification of investments from short term to long term, from short term to long term, from short term to long term, and from less risky to more risky, and from less risky to more risky. Short term to long term, less risky to more risky. Then the last question, what is the specific importance of what is the specific importance of what is the specific importance of financial institutions. What is the specific importance of financial institutions offering pension products to public in Sri Lanka? Pension products to public in Sri Lanka. Let me repeat. What is the specific importance of financial institutions offering pension products to public in Sri Lanka? Okay, so answer these 4 questions. Take your time. After that, we'll discuss these answers. Can someone tell me about the first one? Describe how above funds serve the economy and the society of a country. So what are these funds? Pension funds. Okay. So how they help to the economy and to the society? Yeah, I told you. Yeah, investment in government securities. Okay, good. Now I told you the paper is set in such a manner that a question will be from one area. So if it's insurance, entire set of 4 questions coming from insurance. If it's on primary dealer, if it's on unit trust, the question is based on that. Then most of the time, 3 questions you can answer from what maybe I or someone else has taught you in the class. But one question is something new. You have to think. Now this one, we talked about long-term savings like contractual annuity. We talked about EPF, ETF, private provident funds, okay, these long-term investments. Then we talked why do they diversify. All these things are in the paper. But this one, what do they do to the economy and the society? Okay, to the economy, mobilization of long-term savings to fund investment in securities market and real sector projects. Okay, so you said to government securities, yes, that's there. Mobilization of long-term funds for securities market and real sector projects. Society. What is the benefit to the society from these funds? Society. What is the benefit from these funds? You have EPF, you have ETF, provident funds. Okay. Further elaborate. Cash flow to the general public. Yes. Further elaborate. When do you get and why do you need it? Now that is to the society.
Venture capital.
My dear, now that was for the economy. Venture capital, then you grow the economy. You can think about government securities, long-term investments. That's to the economy. Now to the society. Society means to you and me. What are the benefits? Yeah. Now Sri Lankan society is facing aging population issue, right? So the answer says retirement benefits to reduce age dependency ratio and connect social burden on retired persons. So retired person is a social burden, right? Elderly people who have retired can afford to spend their earned money rather than depending. Very good. So that is the answer. So the model answer says retired benefits for reduced age dependence ratio and connected social burden on retired persons. Okay, right. Second one, EPF and ETF. What is your answer? Say about the contribution by and who manage. At least these 2 differences? EPF, how much you contribute, your employer contribute. ETF, how much and who contribute. That is the first difference. Then who manage and administrate. That's the second difference. Tell me them.
EPF employer contribution is 12%, employee contribution 8%, ETF
Very
is
good.
3%.
3%.
It's employer contribution from the basic.
Yeah. From the employer, yes. So this is the first difference. Second one, EPF is managed by monetary board and administered by Commission of Labor. So we discussed that in the class. And ETF by ETF board. So that these are the differences. Then what was the third one? Yeah. Why do you diversify? You diversify short term, long term, risky, less risky. Why? Your investments, now you diversify. How do you diversify? Term, long term and short term. You invest in treasury bills, short term, less than 1 year, and long term, maybe development bonds for 20 years. Then risk, you go for shares, which the risk is high. You go for government securities, which the risk is low. Why you diversify? Why do you diversify? Tell me the reasons. Yeah. Why do you diversify? Liquidity. What is liquidity? Sometimes you need cash now. Sudden, unexpected claims. Then certain things you can hold for long years because the person is going to retire, then only he want the money back. So number one, liquidity. Number two, reduce on risk, concentration risk. Number three, enhanced return. So if you go for less risky, your return is less. Enhanced return. Okay. Right. What is the answer for the fourth one? These financial institutions offering pension funds. Importance. What is the importance for Sri Lanka? To meet the requirement of aging population. Number two, non-availability of pension scheme for many private sector employees. Okay, so this question was raised only once. Superannuities I discussed in the class, but this question based on superannuities was on paper only once. That was in 2014, 7 years ago. Right? Remember, when you are preparing for the exam, there are two approaches. Number one, easy method. What is the easy method? Finding a set of questions that can be repeated and you are going to predict like a horoscope reader. Okay, so in the paper, this question will be there, this area will be tested, and I'll study only that. That's one method. The other, try everything. Have a good knowledge on everything. Superannuities, just tested once, but I study that. Okay. Pawning, twice tested, but I study that. Insurance, again and again repeated, maybe the favorite of the examiner. I'm okay with that. So that is the second approach. So my recommendation is go with the second approach. Right. Now we are coming to the end of the session. Let me tell you, Sri Lankan version of Enron, as far as I know that. There was a company by the name of Touchwood Sri Lanka, Touchwood Investment Sri Lanka. Maybe 20 years ago, they came to our office. A set of sales team from Touchwood Investments came to Sri Lanka. In English, Touchwood means to tell the truth. Okay. Be very careful when someone says, I only speak truth. That may be the biggest lie. Okay. So Touchwood came to our office and the sales team were discussing about future plans on investment. And what they said is, in a summarized form, 20 years from today, teak, take, the leaf, the wood will be like gold, very expensive. Think about the deforestation and so many nice examples. And wood, if you have a plot of, say, 5 purchases of teak, you will be having enough money to lead a peaceful, retired life. And what you can do now is buy this plot of land. We will grow teak plants on that, and after 20 years, we will cut them, sell them, and you will be guaranteed this much of millions if you just invest 100,000 with us. You'll be owner of 5 purchased land, and at any moment you can visit that. We are doing in this particular area. Okay. Then one good friend of mine said, now if teak is going to be that much expensive, what I'll do is I have 1 acre land in Suryaweber. I'll rent it out for you for 20 years, and after 20 years we will share our profit. Then they said, so that is not our plan. You have to buy our plots. So that's how they were selling these products, and the marketing was very aggressive. Some fell into the trap. Right? Now they were catering to this requirement, long-term investments. Some people purchased their plots of land. Like Enron, they found mark-to-market accounting loop, and they showed good profits in their financials, and the share price was escalating continuously. It's like what Enron was doing. Enron said, we are digging and finding oil, and you talk about future income. They talk about planting teak today, and after 20 years, this is your income. And that is taken to account now. That's how they were selling and selling shares. Share price was continuously escalating. That was one of the famous pick among Colombo Stock Exchange. Like at Enron, a journalist. Those days we had a very good forum, Sri Lanka Equity Forum. One person wrote an article about this well-esteemed company, Touchwood. He showed pictures of teak plants. My dear, it was about 15 years old now. These teak trees are not even good for firewood, ill-treated. I mean, teak trees you don't want to even look after. They will grow on their own. But these were like so tiny, so thin. And this article carried a lot of such other information. Immediately, there were repercussions in the market, and the share price started to come down. Then ownership was transferred from this company to that company. It was like playing music chairs. And finally, share prices started to come down, and shareholders were armed up against the management, and they were ready to ask and question the management of the company. Enron, they appointed Arnold Schwarzenegger as mayor of California. Similarly, I will show you, hope you can read. On 25th of September 2013, MP, those days he was a member of parliament, Duminda Silva was appointed to Touchwood board. So no shareholder will ask question from the board. And after 1 month, Duminda Silva resigned from Touchwood, and the share price came down. Okay, so what happened in US happened in Sri Lanka. So today Touchwood is not a trading share. Last financial statements, as far as I can remember, the net asset was about 160 rupees audited, like Enron. But the share was final trading in cents, maybe 35 cents, maybe 25 cents. And that's no more traded. Okay. That's where you need good corporate governance. That's where finance companies and banks are protected. That's where you must carefully understand corporate governance. Okay, right. So the structure, board appointed committees, age, propriety, how many times they meet. Okay, the composition of the board, which include direct executive and non-executive independent directors. Okay, so these things they are set out. And by now, this has become a favorite problem from the examiner. Okay, so we will take one more week and complete corporate governance. Right. So today I didn't put much on questions. I selected only one, that was on superannuities. Right. So remember the structure. 3 questions will be from non-studied areas. 1, you have to think and write. In order to think and write, you must be armed with data. For that, my dear, please get updated. Listen to news, read articles. Okay. Now this website is blocked from my end, but I would suggest you to go through that. Touchwood, a case of deception and confusion, Sri Lanka. Okay. So read about Enron, read about Touchwood. Right. Then, yeah, maybe CIFL, Touchwood, Golden Key, Enron, read about this. They will become your own case studies. With that, I'll end today's session. Next week, we will also meet and discuss further on corporate governance. Thank you.